When it comes to horse racing, you can never have too much information. With TwinSpires, you can place your bets with confidence, whether you use handicapping insights like our Brisnet speed ratings, prime power and past performances, the guidance of our experts' top picks, or just choose a name that catches your eye. Yes! No matter how you pick your horse, bet with TwinSpires. And now you can share the thrill with friends using our exclusive Bet Share feature.
The TwinSpires Racing Roundtable. I'm Ashley Anderson here with James Scully and Vance Hanson. And it's the final racing roundtable before Kentucky Derby 150 and the Kentucky Oaks. So today we're going to do more of a preview as opposed to a recap and talk all things Derby and Oaks. And Vance will jump right in and start with the Kentucky Derby. And of course, the main question on everyone's mind is who should they bet in this race? So as it stands right now, we don't have the post positions yet, but who is your top contender at the moment?
Well, I have all the respect in the world for the two favorites. Fierceness looks the fastest horse on paper by quite a ways, and Sierra Leone has looked tremendous as well, winning a key edition of the Risen Star in the Bluegrass. But I'm usually looking for more value in the Derby than what those two will provide. So right now I'm gravitating toward Catching Freedom, who's really done little wrong, and he figures to be
there
about
is
10 to
Catching
1
Freedom galloping.
in the
He has his
10 to 1
neck
morning
bowed.
line
He means
odds
business
range.
there, Tony.
Yeah, he sure does.
Although he was third best to Sierra Leone in the Risen Star, he really stepped up his game in the Louisiana Derby, producing a tremendous last to first rally. And he was coming off of a much slower pace than Sierra Leone did when that horse won the Bluegrass Stakes. So I thought it was a really impressive performance by Catching Freedom. He's improving right at the right time. He's got Brad Cox and Flavian Pratt in his corner, and he's going to be a good price. So at this moment, I'm going for Catching Freedom. He will have to work out a trip being a deep closer, like they all have to, Sierra Leone included. But he simply hasn't made many mistakes in my eyes, and he's a viable contender, especially with that winning Churchill Downs surface form to boot, James.
I'm going with the Sierra Leone. And Sierra Leone is a colt that in his final 2-year-old start, I think his connections believed he pulled himself up on the lead of the Remsen, gave up a length lead in mid-stretch and got beat a nose on the wire by Dornick. Chad Brown came back this year, added blinkers, got up in the final strides of that Risen Star, real deep race. And then in the Bluegrass that we're watching right now, he took a step forward off of that Risen Star. I thought this was a much better effort. He won convincingly in the end and really earned career best numbers, earned a triple-digit Brisnet speed rating, took the step forward from a number perspective that I wanted to see. So I think everything has gone to plan so far this year for Sierra Leone. I think he's going to get the hot and contested pace that he will relish in the Kentucky Derby. And while he must load better than he did in the Bluegrass Stakes when he balked at the starting gate, he had never had issues with that before. And if he gets in the gate just fine, I'll look for Sierra Leone to deliver a top showing and win the Kentucky Derby, Ashley.
Sierra Leone is my top pick as well. He's been my top pick for a while, so I have no reason to shy away from him right now. But I'm not going to get probably a very good price at post time. I am glad I locked him in pool 6, which still wasn't the greatest price. You got a much better one, James, in an earlier pool. So if I'm looking for value, I'm right there with you in Catching Freedom, Vance. I like him as well coming off that Louisiana Derby win. I also think Honor Marie is another interesting closer, and he has 2 wins at Churchill Downs. And if you're looking for a runner who's not a closer type, if you want someone who's going to be up closer to the early speed, I think Resilience coming off that 104 Brisnet speed figure could be a longer shot worth backing as well. But right now, my top pick is Sierra Leone because ever since he added blinkers, seems like the focus is better, and that closing kick is so good that we saw in the Bluegrass. It's just hard to bet against him. And if we get a sloppy track, the forecast, it's a little far out right now, but the forecast I think could have some rain in there for Derby Day. And if it does, then 100% backing Sierra Leone over a muddy or sloppy track. Also on a fast track, definitely in the mud.
Don't trust that forecast this far out.
I know. I'm hoping there's no rain if we're lucky, but When I looked the other day, there was a lot of rain all throughout the week, but of course, it's very, very early. Well, let's move over to the Kentucky Oaks. And James, where are you landing right now with the Kentucky Oaks field?
Well, I was pretty wide open with as far as the Oaks. I've taken a more serious look at it in recent days, and I like it just FYI. I mean, she was unbeaten from 3 starts last year, won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies at almost 8-1 odds, so was a little overlooked in that race. And she did not come back. She got sick before her first planned comeback race. Bill Mott planned 2 races for her, so she had to make a belated seasonal debut in the Ashland, just FYI did. She rallied wide off of the far turn, went against the track flow to be a good second. And I love how she's trained at Churchill Downs. On Tuesday morning, just FYI, went out and breezed 5 furlongs. She had to work last Thursday, a maintenance move in company with Resilience or Stablemate. And she was all rank at the start of that. And they went real easy, but it wasn't a very smooth move. Now, she is a little bit eager in these early stages of this drill, but I really like what we see approaching the wire and in the gallop out. First and foremost, we'll see her when she comes by in the stretch. I mean, just FYI is built to be a grade 1 winning type at a 1.125 distance. She's got a real big rear end. And I think she's taken to the track based on just how she's getting over it in this breeze that we're watching. The best part of her move, too, not only was it a bullet 5 furlong workout in 59.80 seconds, but just FYI, galloped out the next 1/8 of a mile in 12.4 seconds. She then went her second 1/8 of a mile. They caught her galloping out in 13.2 seconds. And then her third 1/8 of a mile, they got that in 14.2 seconds. That means they clocked her going 3 furlongs in a gallop out, basically pulling herself up in 1:40.1. And there might be horses in this year's Derby field couldn't go out and breeze 1:40.1. So you can see her right here. This gallop out on the first turn after the wire is exactly what every single person wants to see from their Kentucky Derby horse in the days leading up to the race. This is one of the best gallop outs I've ever seen at Churchill Downs. I thought it was brilliant, and I think just FYI, it's set for a big effort in the Oaks, Vance.
Well, at this early stage, I've debated whether to side with Gulfstream Park Oaks winner Power Squeeze or Ashland winner Leslie's Rose. Power Squeeze is going to be the better price, but Leslie's Rose, I think, might simply be the better horse of the two after her big win in the Ashland. After demonstrating some greenness when taking some dirt to the face on the Devona Dale 2-back when she was kind of buried on the inside, she handled a similar situation early in the Ashland like a pro. And then, as you can see, she romped to a 3-length win very impressively. She did have a recency edge in the Ashland over Just FYI, like you said, James. Just FYI was making her season debut. Leslie's Rose had already had a few starts going into the Ashland, but as is the case with my Derby selection, I think Leslie's Rose is really coming into this race really good now. And she hails from the Todd Pletcher barn, who has already won 4 Kentucky Oaks with such standouts as Ashado, Rags to Riches, Princess of Silmar, and Malathot. And if Leslie's Rose can win the Oaks for Pletcher, he will have tied Woody Stevens and his mentor, D. Wayne Lucas, for most Oaks wins of all time with 5 apiece. So right now I'm leaning towards Leslie's Rose, Ashley.
I'm with you, James, going just FYI, hoping that I get a better price at post time because she's coming off that second place finish to Leslie's Rose. And as you referenced, that workout looked great at Churchill. So definitely feel like that bodes well for what's going to happen that first Friday in May, which is my birthday, just FYI. That was a bad joke. But anyway, I also wanted to bring up Tarifa because she's the points leader. And I feel like I should be more confident in this runner who has 2 stakes wins from 2 tries against Stakes Company. But sounds like a lot of people are kind of looking elsewhere with Tarifa. James, do you have any thoughts on that? Why we aren't hearing a lot of hype around Tarifa right now?
Well, I just don't think she was one of Brad Cox's highly thought of 3-year-old fillies coming into the year. She dropped her last start at age 2 at Churchill Downs. It was an allowance race. She ran like sort of a dull fourth in there. Now she's come back with 3 straight wins this year and has progressed significantly since then. But to me, she's got a little bit of that profile like Catching Freedom, where there's some questions about perhaps the competition she beat at Fairgrounds. I mean, maybe he's not facing that, but she's more of like an up and comer in the Brad Cox barn. And I thought her best race was the Rachel Alexandra. I loved how she was caught behind horses in the stretch, altered course, and kept accelerating. I think that kind of nimbleness will serve her well in the Kentucky Oaks, and I respect her chances as well, Ashley.
Her Brosnad speed figures were a little light compared to others in the field. You mentioned Power Squeeze. Vance had a 95 last out, and Tarifa had an 89 last out in her win. So she does need a little bit higher speed figures. Just FYI has a career best 100 Brosnad speed figure. And then we also have this interesting runner, Where's My Ring, who has a 104 in her win last out in her 8th career start. But it was her 8th career start. That was her first career win. So kind of unsure what to do with her resume overall heading into this race. And then you've got another Brad Cox runner, Jin Jin. If we get a muddy track, Jin Jin seems to like the mud. I just think this field is all over the place, but going to go with Just FYI at the moment. And really, seems like anything could happen with this field.
And I'll just mention real quick, I mean, Ways and Means is 14th on this list, but I won't be surprised if she's like the second favorite. I mean, she could theoretically possibly be the favorite. She's got a lot of numbers bettors that will be supporting her. So she's dangerous and doesn't get a lot of pub right now.
There is another runner. Go ahead, Vance.
Going back to Tarifa, early in the winter, I thought the 3-year-old filly division at Fairgrounds was probably the best anywhere in the country. But, in the ensuing months, I think that it's kind of gravitated more towards the fillies that were wintered in Florida and moved down to Keeneland and the Ashland Stakes. So I don't know exactly how deep the fields Tarifa was beating in the Rachel Alexandra and Fairgrounds Oaks. I think that's probably why a lot of people have cooled on her. And also she was showing a little bit of rankness in the Fairgrounds Oaks too. And oftentimes, showing that would have proven a detriment to her win chances, but she overcame it and won anyway. But I don't think she can afford to do something similar in a much bigger field at Churchill Downs next week.
Speaking of Fairgrounds in Louisiana, there's a star guitar filly on the outside looking in Menominee Gold, who's unbeaten, has been racing over in Dubai and won the UAE Oaks and just transferred to Todd Pletcher's barn as well. So if she draws in, could be an interesting runner to keep an eye on and just mix things up even more.
They just have to supplement her. The whole reason why she isn't on the list is that she's not eligible for the Oaks, but she's going to have the points by virtue of that UAE Oaks win to be in the top 14. So if they make the announcement that they're officially going to supplement her, I think it's like $60,000 or something to supplement to the Oaks. I'm not positive about that. Then she'll be joining the leaderboard because she is in the top 14 for new trainer, Todd Pletcher. Sorry.
I'm glad you cleared that up for me. But yeah, she's very good. Beat a really good Justify filly last out as well. And finally, James, the morning work started this past week, and I know you've been paying very close attention. So when doing your handicapping, is there anything from the morning works that has stood out for you, or anything else like equipment changes when you're making your final choices with your wagering?
Well, I mean, we're going to have a notable equipment change with the long shot in the Derby and Track Phantom. I'll let you talk about that a little bit, Ashley. But I will mention Sierra Leone was on the train to Churchill Downs for the first time on Monday. Fierceness was out there this morning, Tuesday morning. So both big horses are on the grounds. They're both going to work this weekend. So really excited to see them continue to train towards Derby 150. I'll mention Catching Freedom. You guys have both talked about Catching Freedom earlier, but to me, he's really made a favorable impression in the mornings. I loved his gallop this morning, and first off, Catching Freedom got drilled in his final juvenile start, just like Tarifa did at Churchill Downs. He ran a non-threatening fourth. He came back in the Smarty Jones on January 1st, and he got an 89 Bristnet speed rating. and that race has never had any impact on the Derby. And I don't think people took him seriously earlier this year. Plus, he was training at fairgrounds with Timberlake, Just a Touch, Nash, and a whole bunch of fast-working Brad Cox horses in the same barn. And he clearly was no standout in the morning works. But I think obviously his form has improved, finishing third in the Risen Star and winning the Louisiana Derby. And I think he's become a much better workhorse too. I mean, he's like just thriving in the mornings. He's full of himself. He's professional in these works. And I'm really amazed by his progression. I think he's gone from being maybe the fifth or sixth best 3-year-old in Brad Cox's barn at the start of the year in some people's minds to being the top one and having a serious chance to get Brad Cox's second Kentucky Derby win next weekend. So there's a couple
It's interesting you note that. When I was down at the fairgrounds, Brad Cox was saying that Catching Freedom wasn't the best workhorse. And if you look at his workouts, didn't always look very flashy. So the fact that you're saying now he's doing really well in his workouts, that makes me take note and think I got to circle him for first Saturday in May.
Listen, I think that these horses can do things differently and such, but I've been watching Honor Marie the last 2 mornings, and he's like tossing his head and having to be really heavily restrained. It might just be because he's feeling good and going to run a big race. But to me, I watch Catching Freedom with his head bowed, wanting to do more, but responding and listening to his rider like a real pro. I think he looks better galloping over the track than Honor Marie does. Now, I could be wrong about that in Derby Day, but I would take Catching Freedom over him, and I think he's got a serious chance to win.
What about you, Vance? What have you noted from workouts, or what do you normally look for the week out of the Kentucky Derby?
Well, instead of commenting on somebody that's been looking good, I'm going to comment on somebody that hasn't been looking all that great, and that's Jeff Ruby, winner Endlessly, who's never raced on dirt, but he's gotten 3 works over the Churchill surface already this month, and he really appears to be struggling over the surface, especially this past Saturday in his most recent drill. He was kind of working alongside a recent maiden winner, and ultimately he really couldn't keep up with him and didn't gallop out well by comparison.
No.
Trainer Michael McCarthy was really keen on targeting the American Turf Stakes on the Derby Day card with Endlessly after he won the Jeff Ruby at Turfway. And I think, reading between the lines, McCarthy would prefer to stick to that original plan, but the fact that he hasn't officially been removed yet from Derby consideration suggests that there's a difference of opinion among his connections on where this horse should run next. Based on what we've seen in his morning works over this surface, Endlessly deserves to run where he best fits, and arguably that would be the American turf. If he does end up being a Derby starter, he's a big fade for me, even in vertical exotics, Ashley.
And you can even see it right here, Vance. I mean, you're right. I mean, that's him on the inside. He was completely laboring after the wire. You know, Michael McCarthy said he thought about running him on dirt last year and trained him in the mornings, and he didn't train well on the dirt out in California. So he didn't train well on dirt last year. He's not training forwardly on dirt this year. The thing with like a horse like Animal Kingdom, who had never run on dirt like Endlessly, but on turf and synthetic, he came to Churchill Downs and worked like 6 furlongs in 1:13 and did it effortlessly, skipping over the track. Everybody that saw that work was impressed. And it's been the complete opposite story with Endlessly. I agree completely with what Vance said.
Now I'm going to take it over to the equipment changes happening, and you kind of referenced this, James. Track Phantom has been working out with blinkers, which he hasn't had blinkers in any of the starts he's had previously. Now, I don't know that I am going to really put much weight into this because I don't really like Track Phantom at 1.25 miles. He had 3 straight wins at 1.16 miles, and since stretching out, he's had the early lead and gotten caught late. So I don't really think that he's going to improve even with the blinkers at this added distance. But I will say, in general, when handicapping, it is important to note equipment changes like blinkers added, things of that nature, especially if the trainer has a high percentage winning with those equipment changes. And I'll talk last year's Kentucky Oaks. Brendan Walsh added blinkers to Pretty Mischievous. She was coming off a second in the Fairgrounds Oaks. She had the lead and was caught late, and then added blinkers ahead of the Kentucky Oaks, was 10-1 at post time. And those blinkers made a difference. She ended up getting a late challenge from Gambling Girl, but was able to hold on to the wire and won that race. So if you see an equipment change and you see the stats on the trainer doing well with that equipment change, certainly take note. I'm not going to, like I said, I don't think it's going to make a difference with Track Phantom. I could be wrong, but I'm certainly going to keep an eye out for any other equipment changes with other horses. Like we talked about with Sierra Leone, adding blinkers after his Rimson loss where he was beaten by a nose has made a difference as well.
The one thing I liked about this move was he went, and granted, this is in the morning when everything's controlled, and maybe it won't be the same in the race itself, but he went this opening eighth of a mile with the blinkers in 26-1. And he completed his last 3/8 in 34.8. That's really, really fast for the final 3/8 of a move. And he has so much natural speed, he's going to put himself into early positioning in the Derby. I'm sure Steve Asmussen isn't worried about positioning early because he has so much natural speed from the starting gate. He just wants him to save a little bit more for the stretch. And if the blinkers help him conserve some energy, then they're going to serve their purpose. It's just a matter of whether he's good enough. You and I got a little bit of a different opinion on those Louisiana races. I like Track Phantom a little bit from an underneath perspective, but I don't have anything in my mind made up as far as those picks go yet, Ashley.
I certainly would play him underneath, but I'm not betting him to win the Kentucky Derby.
All right.
But we'll see what happens. All right, well, that's all the time we have today for the Racing Roundtable. We'll be back after the first Saturday in May, and opening weekend is this Saturday at Churchill, April 27th. We have a money-back offer that will last this entire week, the first week of the Churchill meet, going all the way through Derby Day. It's a $10 money-back offer. You can get up to $10 back on your win bet if your horse finishes second or third in all eligible races at Churchill Downs that first week of the meet. And of course, be sure to use it on Kentucky Derby Day as well. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys. 210.
All right.
All right. A lot of good viewers. Thank you.
Sweet.
Awesome.
Hundreds.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Vance.
I'll give my computer back to Lance now. See ya.